Hello, everyone. Welcome to U.S. Institute of Peace. We're very glad to have a very special day discussing U.S. and North Korea relations as well as South Korea relations. As you know, many of you may know, may not know, U.S. Institute of Peace was founded in 1984, and it was founded by U.S. Congress. So it is a completely nonpartisan effort to build peace around the world. And so today we're very happy to have an event that with Sejong Institute in Korea, as well as we are also taking advantage of Minister Kim, Minister of Unifications in Korea. We've just had a couple of hours of discussions, and we're continuing those discussions. And so to start with, I would like to invite Baek Jong-chan, Chancellor of Sejong Institute. It's a joint program to provide some opening remarks. And then I will invite Minister Kim for his remarks. After those, there will be some Q's and A's, and then we'll move to a first panel immediately after that. Thank you very much. Dr. Baek?
네, 방금 소개받은 백종차입니다. 존경하는 앰베서더 조셉 윤 and Dr. Frank Ohm 그리고
Okay. So President Nancy Lindborg, Mr. Joseph Yoon, Minister Kim, and distinguished guests and experts from the U.S. and Korea, especially Unification Minister Yeon Chul, and on behalf of the President Baek Hak-sun and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, as the chairman of the Sejong Institute, I would like to express my deep gratitude, and I'm honored to be speaking at the U.S. Institute of Peace. This morning, we already discussed North Korean nuclear issues and other U.S.-Korean issues as well. And during the past year, I was able to have many discussions with scholars here in the United States. But issue of the Korean Peninsula, and especially the nuclear issue, is one that everyone has their own personal theory about, and all experts have their own ideas about how to resolve the Korean Peninsula and nuclear issue. I respect them, and I hope that they will all continue their research in this manner. However, rather than talking in a scholarly manner, I want to talk realistically about what should happen before the end of the year. We only have 1.5 months left. Chairman Kim Jong-un has already set this deadline at the end of the year and saying that there needs to be some change after this deadline. As a Korean, I believe that this deadline is very worrisome. The Korean regime that I know and the leaders that I know, once they say something, they actually take action, regardless of whether we like it or not. So if the end of this year passes without any action, I think that something bad will happen. And so many experts have talked in the past, and there are many theories about why practitioner talks did not succeed. But all the ideas up to now, all the contents of the discussions needs to be integrated so that in the next 1.5 months, when North Korea and the US meet again, so in what way should we meet, or who should meet, which practitioners? We need to be in agreement on this. And in this morning, we talked about how to bring North Korea to the negotiating table. The U.S. is a country that loves peace more than anyone in this world. And the Koreans believe that Americans are such. And so we hope that the American government will try to find a solution from the point of view of a smaller nation. So this is something that I would like to talk about or hear about more about in the afternoon sessions. And for the rest of the discussions, I hope that this can be an unraveling point to the North Korea nuclear issue. And real expectations for peace on the Korean Peninsula can proceed forward. I hope that 2020 will be such a year when these citizens and experts of the United States will help us to do this. So I would like to end my remarks with this sentence. Thank you.
Of security and strategic studies in Korea, and I knew him when he was the National Security Advisor some 12, 14 years ago. It's good to see you here. Next, I would like to introduce Unification Minister Yeon Chul. In fact, I met him about 6-7 months ago when he was still the head of Korea Institute of National Unification, Keynote. And it was at that time we talked about doing a program like this in USIP, and we talked about, actually it's a forthcoming study from US Institute of Peace on peace regime on Korean Peninsula. So actually that study was very much inspired by Minister Kim, and I'm very happy that he got a big promotion. He's a minister, and Minister, please come on up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I am Yeon Chul, Minister of Unification for the Republic of Korea. I would like to extend a sincere welcome to all of you who have come to the Korea Global Forum's U.S. seminar. I'd like to express my many thanks to Jung Chun-baek, Chairman of the Sejong Institute, and Ambassador Joseph Yeon of the United States Institute of Peace, and to all distinguished guests. Cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. being more important now than ever, I am conscious of the significance of directly explaining the South Korean government's policy on North Korea to America's top experts on the Korean Peninsula. I thank you all for the interest and affection you bring to bear on the Korean Peninsula, and I look forward to a substantial discussion that can light the way ahead on that path to peace, which South Korea and the United States have been traveling together. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the state of affairs on the Korean Peninsula is now at an important turning point. On October 5th, working levels talks in Stockholm restarted the clock of dialogue between the U.S. and North Korea that had come to a stop after the Hanoi summit of last February. Although an agreement was not reached, the spark of dialogue has not gone out. North Korea has repeatedly emphasized the deep trust that exists between both countries' leaders, while emphasizing the end of the year as the deadline for negotiations. The United States, too, with a stronger will than ever, is making the utmost effort to solve the problem at hand. This is a precious opportunity for the United States, for North Korea, and most of all, for South Korea. We cannot let this opportunity pass because it will not come again. The solution to bringing about real progress in the peace process on the Korean Peninsula is not as far off as one might think. From past history, we already know that changes in relations are at the core of a solution to issues related to the Korean Peninsula. There may be many relevant actors, but the most important thing is the organic relationship between the three actors, South Korea, North Korea, and the United States. When these three bilateral relationships between the two Koreas, North Korea and U.S., and between South Korea and U.S., have been in step with each other, thereby creating a virtuous cycle, there have been progress in the Korean Peninsula too. The experiences of the last year are a case in point. Dialogue between the two Koreas heightened North Korea's will to denuclearize and improve relations with the U.S. In a virtuous cycle, this led to talks between U.S. and North Korea and to concrete measures. A new transformation of this triangular relationship is needed in the current standstill so that the resolution of issues related to the Korean Peninsula can regain momentum and make progress. Last September, at a summit held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, the leaders of the United States and South Korea affirmed the need to transform the relations between the two Koreas, as well as the relationship between North Korea and the United States. On this occasion, I'd like to discuss the direction that triangular relations between the U.S. and the two Koreas should take, while focusing on each of these three bilateral relations in turn. First of all, the times for a bolder transformation of inter-Korean relations. Since the truce of 1953, inter-Korean relations have repeatedly stopped and started, moving alternately towards peace and war, towards understanding and misunderstanding, towards the future and the past. Last year, dazzling and unprecedented results were achieved. But as progress slowed in denuclearization talks, we have again entered a state of lull. The road ahead for inter-Korean relations remains a long one, and there are many issues that need to be resolved. Most urgent of all is the need to address the greatest tragedy of division, namely the problem of separated families. Of the 133,000 members of separated families who have applied to the South Korean government for family reunions, some 60% have already passed away. The surviving 53,000 applicants are reaching an average age of 81 years. Their simple but desperate hopes are to confirm whether family members are alive or dead, or at least travel to the vicinity of their home region before any more time is lost. We have to enable these people to meet their families before their death. This urgent humanitarian problem must take precedence before any political considerations. The South Korean government is also aware that members of some separated families reside in the United States. Recently, while expressing condolences in regard to the passing of President Moon Jae-in's mother, President Trump indicated an interest in the issue of separated families. South and North Korea have already agreed to open a permanent meeting place as part of a fundamental solution to the problem of separated families. The South Korean government is doing its utmost for the speedy implementation of this agreement. The South Korean government also bears the responsibility to solve a variety of other problems that have arisen as a result of division. This is a duty stipulated by our constitution and our legislation. Moreover, the inter-Korean relationship can achieve harmony with the shared American and South Korean goal of denuclearized peninsula and a peace system, and become a useful route for encouraging North Korea to make the right choices. So far, it has been our historical experience that when relations are good between the two Koreas, North Korean nuclear threat lessens. Last year, we saw directly that by leading the way, inter-Korean relationship ushered in the improvement of relations between North Korea and the U.S., as well as the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. Furthermore, the implementation of measures for the relaxation of military tensions that were agreed to in the Pyongyang Joint Declaration of 2018 have dramatically reduced the danger of accidental military clashes and created favorable conditions for denuclearization talks. The denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and the establishment of a permanent peace are important concerns for the United States, but they're the most important concerns of all to South Korea, whose future and fate depend on them. The South Korean government is constantly exploring plans for the development of an inter-Korean relationship that can contribute to the improvement of relations between U.S. and North Korea, as well as to progress in the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. It's true that various external conditions greatly limit the room within which inter-Korean relations can operate, but there certainly exist roles that the inter-Korean relationship must play in the process of building peace on the peninsula. If the inter-Korean relationship is tight and bound, relations between the U.S. and North Korea will also have a hard time progressing beyond a certain level. At this point, the important thing is for leaders of the two Koreas to implement carefully the items agreed to in last year's summits of Panmunjom and Pyongyang. Recently, North Korea approached the South Korean government and relevant business operators with a demand for removal of decrepit facilities from Mount Kumgang, which it intends to make into an international tourist area. At the same time, however, North Korea made it clear that removal would proceed through consultation and that South Korean citizens would also be welcome at Mount Kumgang. In the 10 years after the first cruise ship left harbor in 1998, 1,930,000 South Korean citizens visited the Kumgang Mountains, making them a symbol of inter-Korean exchange and cooperation, and a place in which citizens of North and South Korea could meet and interact. Last year, the leaders of South and North Korea agreed on a plan to normalize tourist operations in the Kumgang Mountains when conditions are prepared. It has been the consistent position of the South Korean government that all problems pertaining to inter-Korean relations must be solved through dialogue and consultation. This holds true for the issue of Mount Kumgang tourism as well. Once the two Koreas sit face to face, a creative, implementable solution can be found that satisfies both sides. The South Korean government regards the current situation not as a crisis for Mount Kumgang tourism, but as an opportunity to prepare the foundation for sustainable inter-Korean exchange and cooperation. Keeping in mind the changed conditions and environment, the South Korean government will actively push for the resumption and vitalization of Mount Kumgang tourism through consultation with North Korea. Expanding the scope of cooperation, a joint inter-Korean tourist area will be created along part of the East Sea coast, and inter-Korean human exchanges will be vitalized in accordance with the agreement reached by North and South Korea, South and North Korea and the Pyongyang Joint Declaration. In addition, President Moon proposed in his speech at the UN General Assembly that the DMZ will be turned into an international peace zone. If the DMZ that cuts across the center of the Korean Peninsula can become an arena for cooperation between North and South Korea and the international community, the danger of military clashes will be conspicuously reduced. The DMZ will serve as a stabilizing institution that drives the denuclearization process. Apart from this, there are endless potential areas of cooperation that can be realized right away with benefit to both Koreas, should North Korea respond favorably.
There are roles to be played by every nation in the trilateral relationship. The South Korean government will actively seek out and expand such spaces of sustainable inter-Korean cooperation. The aim is to offer real-world proof that the inner peace can be expanded outward. A transformation of relations between the U.S. and North Korea must be achieved. Both parties had already come to an agreement in Singapore regarding the ultimate goal of denuclearization. It was agreed to exchange the complete denuclearization of North Korea for a guarantee of the security of the North Korean regime. This agreement is still in effect. The current task is for the two parties to agree on the order in which they implement their sides. This is related to the level of trust between North Korea and the U.S. Both countries have maintained hostile relations for over 70 years. The ocean of mistrust is not easy to traverse in one attempt. The reason is that the North Korea and the U.S. must improve their understanding of each other and carefully build trust through dialogue and negotiations. It is to be hoped that follow-up talks begin as soon as possible so that the momentum of negotiations is not lost. Dialogue is the only solution. In addition, creative plans for building early trust between the two sides must be explored. In this regards, attention should be paid to the three principles for resolving issues related to the Korean Peninsula that President Moon had proposed early this year at the UN General Assembly. Those three factors or the principles are zero tolerance for war, a mutual security guarantee, and co-prosperity. Zero tolerance for war means that the firm principle of solving issues related to the Korean Peninsula in a peaceful manner. The truce regime of a Korean Peninsula under a passive peace must be converted to a permanent peace regime in which war cannot break out again. This will be a benefit to America and the entire international community. A mutual security guarantee means creating the security environment in which North Korea can concentrate on denuclearization measures. Chairman Kim Jong-un must be guided in such a way that he continues on the current road and does not abandon the will to do away with the nuclear weapons. While talks are in progress to those ends, both sides must refrain from all hostile actions. Last year, the decision to postpone joint military exercise between South Korea and the U.S. created positive conditions for progress in the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. The co-prosperity means a virtuous cycle for peace and the economy. When peace yields practical benefits to the parties maintaining it, the building of an even firmer peace becomes possible. By encouraging North Korea to choose economy and prosperity instead of nuclear weapons, denuclearization can be driven forward and military tensions reduced. The relaxation of sanctions on North Korea will accelerate denuclearization and the building of peace on the Korean Peninsula. But at what stage and in what scope sanctions are to be relaxed is a question that remains to be answered. A more flexible and creative approach is possible. The inter-Korean relationship can also be an important strategic instrument. By expanding the realm of inter-Korean cooperation, ways can be found in which to provide sufficient inducement to North Korea without arousing the concern of the international community. Considering North Korea's emphasis on the end of the year as a deadline, there is a high possibility that one or two opportunities will present themselves before then. The important thing to remember is that once we lose this opportunity, we do not know when the next one will be. The opportunities of the present must be used to the full effect and not squandered. The experience of past failures can serve as a good lesson. It is difficult to build trust while maintaining hostile policies. The time has come for the North Korea and the U.S. to end their long history of hostile relations. For the Korean peace process to become more effective, we have to have a strong relationship between the U.S. and Korea. For the past six years, the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. has played a key role and rendered important services in keeping peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. Last year, in particular, close cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. allowed for a much stronger stance towards North Korea. We must now move forward and firmly consolidate peace on the Korean Peninsula on the basis of the results achieved during that time. The 4 points set out by the U.S. and North Korea in the Singapore Agreement are milestones showing the way forward for peace process on the Korean Peninsula. The U.S. and Korea must join forces so that progress is achieved in each of those 4 pillars. To those ends, both inter-Korean relations and relations between North Korea and the U.S. must be transformed. A virtuous cycle in the tripartite relationship between North and South Korea and the U.S. must be brought about. with North and South Korea staking out a space for sustainable cooperation, and North Korea and the U.S. carefully building trust between them. We have a common purpose. We have worked together. We have combined wisdom, overcoming adversities. The history of the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. is one of growth upon growth in an ever-changing environment. In the future, too, South Korea and the U.S. will continue to serve the peace and stability of Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia while constantly adjusting and fine-tuning their roles. I appreciate your time today, and thank you.
These things on? Okay, they are on, I guess. We go into Q's and A's, and thank you for your remarks. I especially liked how you set the relationship between North and South, between North Korea and US, and of course between South Korea and US. Maybe if I can take advantage of being the moderator and ask the first question. Of course, you are Minister of Unification, but I didn't hear anything about unification in your remarks. What is the goal of the Moon administration and yourself in general in your approach to unification?
예, 장관님, 먼저 기조연설을 통해서 좋은 말씀을 해주신 데 대한 감사의 말씀을 전해드리고 싶습니다. 장관님께서 기조연설을 하시는 와중에 남북관계, 북미관계, 그리고 한미강제를 다시 한번 강조해 주셨는데요. 제가 이제 사회자인 만큼 첫 질문을 좀 드리도록 하겠습니다. 통일부 장관으로서 이제 통일에 대해서는 기조연설에서 말씀을 안 하셨던 것 같습니다. 그렇다면 문재인 정부와 이제 장관님 그리고 통일부는 지금 현재 어떠한 목적을 가지고 남북관계를 발전시켜 나가기 위해서 노력하고 계신지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
예, 고맙습니다. 한국 내부에서 이 통일 개념에 대한 다양한 의견 차이가 있습니다. 특히 세대 간의 차이가 있는 것 같습니다. 우리 이 분단 1세대는 통일이라는 것을 일민족, 일국가, 일체제로 다시 합친다라는 것을 의미합니다. 그렇지만 젊은 세대는 이 통일이라는 것이 자신의 일상적 삶에 어떤 이익을 줄 것인가 하는 것을 매우 중시하고 그렇기 때문에 좀 더 장기적이고 점진적이고 단계적인 통일을 선호합니다.
So in the case of Republic of Korea, we have a lot of different concepts of unification among the people. I think there is a generation gap and how people see the unification. The first generation of the people who have experienced the separation of a country believes that the unification should come as a one nation, one system, and a one country. However, the younger generation of our people believes in different things. They believe that it is important for the unification to bring benefit to their day-to-day lives. Therefore, they want to have a gradual and long-term approach for a unification process.
그래서 정부의 공식적인 통일 방안은 단계적인 접근이다 이렇게 볼 수가 있을 것 같고요. 한국 사회 내부적으로는 통일에 앞서서 평화라는 것이 매우 중요하고 남북 간의 차이들을 점진적으로 해소해 나가면서 공존과 공동 번영을 하는 것이 매우 중요하다라는 컨센서스가 있습니다.
So therefore, the official plan and the stance of the Korean government is to have a step-by-step approach for unification of two Koreas. And among the Korean people, the peace is something that must be achieved first before we move on to a discussion on the unification issue. And at the same time, we will have to constantly put an effort to reduce the gap between two Koreas. So we will try to create a Korean Peninsula where the two Koreas can coexist and enjoy the prosperity that will come through the inter-Korean cooperations.
Well, thank you for that response. Can we open it up to questions from the floor? Maybe I will stand up so I can see a little better. Okay. So we have one there, and then we'll go up this way and come down that way. Okay. Yeah.
I'm Peter Humphrey, an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. I think it's strange that we're offering security guarantees to a regime that's killed 1.2 million human beings. That's 6 atomic bombs worth of dead bodies. Can you help me understand why this makes any sense? And why would we trade just nuclear weapons for those guarantees and not a closure of the prison camps? Raise the price, raise the stakes, actually save some real lives.
Okay, to save time, let's go up to the next one so we can do 2 by 2.
Stanley Kober. 2 news items from yesterday. One, as I'm sure everybody is aware, our negotiator walked out of the negotiations with South Korea on the military spending issue. The second item, we talk about a pivot to Asia. But I read 3 weeks ago, all our aircraft carriers on the East Coast are in Norfolk. We sent an aircraft carrier into the Persian Gulf yesterday. It's been on deployment for 7 months. We have other commitments. For all the talk about moving to Asia, we are stuck in the Middle East. For both these reasons, what is the future of the US-ROK alliance?
Go ahead.
예, 질문을 좀 정리해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 먼저 북한에 대한 이제 안전 보장에 대해서 이야기를 하고 있는데, 북한의 경우는 약 120만 명의 군인을 보유하고 있고 이제 핵무기 등을 보유하고 있는 국가입니다. 따라서 이런 국가에 대한 안전 보장에 대해서 이제 실질적으로 어떠한 이제 이득이 있을지가 좀 궁금합니다. 특히나 북한 같은 경우는 이제 정치범 소형소 등 인권 등에 대한 심각한 문제가 지금에도 일어나고 있는 상황에서 이제 실질적으로 사람의 목숨을 구하는 것이 중요하지 않을까 싶습니다. 이에 대한 장관님의 의견을 좀 듣고 싶습니다. 이제 두 번째 질문은, 첫 번째로 지금 어제 방위비 분담 협상 과정에서 이제 미국 협상가들이 이제 협상장을 박치고 나왔다는 이제 이야기가 있었습니다. 두 번째로는 이제 아시아 지역과 이제 중동에 이제 미국의 항공모함들이 예전에 배치가 되어 있었는데, 이제 중동 지역에 대한 이제 집중을 미국이 상대적으로 올리면서 이제 아시아 지역에 대한 중요도가 이제 어느 정도 조정이 될 수도 있을 것이라 생각이 됩니다. 이러한 상황에서 이제 한미 동맹의 미래는 어떻게 될 것인지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
I'm happy he's answering them, not me.
예, 첫 번째 질문에 대해서 답변을 드리겠습니다. 안전보장이라는 것은 말 그대로 이 시큐리티 개런티라는 것은 지금 현재 비핵화 협상에서 주로 초점을 맞추고 있는 부분은 북한이 핵무기를 포기할 수 있는 환경을 어떻게 제공할 것인가라는 것입니다. 단기적으로 보면은 북한은 한미 군사훈련의 중단을 요구하고 있고, 장기적으로 보면은 종전선언과 또 한반도 평화체제라고 를 요구를 하고 있습니다. 이런 부분들은 뭐 조세균 대사님도 잘 아시겠지만은 한반도 평화 체제에 대한 논의의 역사는 매우 깁니다. 지난 20-30년 정도 사이에 이 한반도 평화 체제를 어떻게 만들어 나갈 것인가, 또 단계적으로 각각의 로드맵에 대한 많은 구상들이 있습니다.
So regarding the security guarantee, the focus of the security guarantee at this point is to create a room for North Korea and set a condition for North Korea to go for the denuclearization process. And if you look into this in more detail, in short term, North Korea is demanding that the ROK-US combined military exercises should be stopped. And in the long term, they're demanding that there must be an end of war declaration and the establishment of the peace regime. As Ambassador Yeon is well aware of, the discussion that we had regarding the peace regime has a long history. So we had 2 to 3 decades of discussion that we had throughout the globe regarding how to establish a peace regime in the Korean Peninsula. So we are constantly trying to devise a step-by-step approach in different sectors to establish peace regime.
물론 이 과정에서 북한 인권 문제의 실질적인 개선도 매우 중요하다고 생각합니다. 한국 정부도 북한 인권 문제의 개선이 중요하다라는 점에 대해서는 공감을 하고 있습니다. 다만 이 접근 방법과 관련돼서는 남북 관계에 또 특수성이 있기 때문에 여러 가지 차원에서 그야말로 자유권과 또 사회권과 국제사회가 얘기하는 인권의 포괄적 측면들이 그야말로 실질적으로 하나하나 개선할 수 있는 방안들을 찾아가고 있다는 점도 강조하고 싶습니다. 두 번째, 방위비 분담금 문제, 또 지소미아 문제, 사실 지금 한반도를 둘러싸고 한미 간에 여러 가지 어려운 의제들이 있습니다. 이런 의제들이 북핵 협상의 그야말로 집중도를 약화시키지 않을까라는 걱정들도 있습니다. 방위비 분담금 협상에 대해서 제가 구체적으로 말씀드리기는 어려울 것 같지만은 제가 아까도 강조했지만 한미 동맹이 지나온 길들을 보면은 아주 예민하고 민감한 문제들을 또 슬기롭게 극복한 경험들이 있습니다. 이번 사안들도 잘 극복해 나가면서 한미 동맹이 정말 지속 가능한 동맹으로서 거듭날 수 있는 또 기회가 되지 않을까라는 생각도 듭니다.
In this process of implementing the peace regime in the Korean Peninsula, the Korean government is trying to improve the North Korean human rights issue as well. So we're trying to devise an appropriate approach to improve the human rights issue that is going through in North Korea. However, we have to understand there are some unique characteristics in inter-Korean relations. And within this context, we will try our best to improve the freedom of the people in North Korea, as well as the social rights and other internationally recognized important human rights that concerns that North Korea is going through. And regarding the second question on the ROK-US alliance, I think I'm not in the right position to talk about the cost-sharing decisions as well as the negotiation that is going on at this point. However, even if we're going through these difficult negotiations like the cost-sharing issue as well as GSOMIA, I think the ROK and the US alliance will try to bring wisdom together to resolve this issue. However, my concern is that these kind of issues between two countries might reduce the focus and the concentration on the denuclearization negotiation. So I sincerely hope that the alliance can bring wisdoms together to overcome given challenge. And once we overcome this challenge, we'll be able to establish a sustainable cooperation between the two countries.
Thank you. Let's go to our friend David there. Not just because he's our friend, but Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Minister, thank you for your remarks. All Americans and all Koreans share the same values: freedom, individual liberty, liberal democracy, free market economy, and human rights. And I think that in your position, I'd like to emphasize, I really don't think we're going to see an end to the nuclear program or the crimes against humanity being committed in the North until there is a secure, stable, liberal, democratic government determined by the Korean people that might be called a United Republic of Korea. When we see that, I think then we'll see an end to the nuclear program and the human rights issues. My two questions are, how do you think that the United States and South Korea should work together towards what you have presented as a very unique human rights situation in the North? Kim Jong-un denies the human rights of Korean people in the North in order to remain in power. And second, is what kind of support from the United States would you like toward unification and toward achieving Korean unification? How should the United States support that? The last three presidents of both Korea and the United States have all said peaceful unification is a goal. And even President Trump and President Moon on June 30th, 2017 said that South Korea will take the lead in establishing the conditions for peaceful unification. So how would you like the United States to support the unification process?
예, 장관님 좋은 말씀 감사합니다. 미국은 어떻게 보면은 이제 자유와 이제 민주주의 그리고 시장 경제 체제의 기반으로 이제 자유로운 국가로 이제 발전해 나가고 있었지만 저희가 북한을 보았을 때는 인권 문제뿐만이 아니라 이제 핵 문제 그리고 이제 다양한 비인륜적 문제들이 지속적으로 발생하는 국가라고 생각이 됩니다. 저는 개인적으로 생각하는 것이 이러한 문제들이 이제 근본적으로 해결되기 위해서는 이제 북한에도 자유민주주의와 시장 경제 체제 등이 도입이 되어야 된다고 생각합니다. 이러한 과정에서 대한민국 정부도 이제 상당히 많은 노력을 해야 될 것이고 이제 북한을 한국처럼 바꾸지 않고서는 이러한 문제들의 해결이 어렵다고 생각이 됩니다. 그렇다면 이 과정에서 이제 한국과 미국은 다양한 협력을 진행하고 있습니다. 북한의 인권 문제 관련해서는 이제 김정은 위원장이 지속적으로 이러한 문제들을 외면하고 있고 이를 통해서 정권 유지하고 있는 상황입니다. 이 과정에서 이제 어떻게 이러한 문제를 해결할 수 있을 것이라 생각이 되시는지요? 두 번째는 이제 한미 동맹 관계 그리고 이제 미국의 지원이 다양한 분야에서 있을 수 있겠으나 이제 한반도의 통일을 위해서 이제 미국이 어떠한 역할을 수행할 수 있을지 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 특히나 이제 문재인 대통령과 트럼프 대통령께서 정상회담을 하는 과정에서도 이제 한반도의 평화 통일을 위해서 이제 미국이 다양한 지원을 하겠다라는 말씀을 하셨던 것 같습니다. 이 과정에서 미국의 역할이 어떤 것이 있을지 말씀해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
예, 먼저 북한의 변화와 관련돼서는 한꺼번에 모든 것을 미국이 원하는 또 한국이 원하는 그런 것을 이루기는 쉽지 않을 거라고 생각을 합니다. 이 변화를 어떻게 변화가 가능할 수 있는 환경들을 조건들을 어떻게 만들어 나갈 것인가 하는 것인데요. 한국의 입장에서 북한의 변화와 관련돼서는 정부마다 약간의 정책의 차이들이 있지만은 문재인 정부는 기본적으로 접촉을 통한 변화라는 개념에 입각해 있습니다. 아시다시피 서로 접촉을 하면서 관계를 맺어나가면서 변화들을 가져나가는 것이 바람직하다라고 생각을 하고 있습니다.
So first of all, if we want to bring change to North Korea, we cannot bring every change that we want at once. Therefore, we should constantly try to set condition and shape the environment for North Korea to make a gradual change. And in different administration in the Republic of Korea, we might have a little different approach toward North Korea. However, the approach that we have from Moon Jae-in administration is that we want to bring change in North Korea through the contact and the engagement. So as you know, the contact as well as the engagement toward North Korea will create a room for us to establish a new relations with the North Korea, which will make gradual changes to that country.
예, 그리고 두 번째 질문은 현재 북한의 비핵화를 이루어 나가는 과정에서 한미 간에 협력해야 될 부분들에 대해서는 제가 아까 강조를 했습니다. 그리고 더 나아가서는 평화로운 한반도라는 미래의 상황에서 한미동맹의 역할과 기능에 대해서도 지금부터 준비를 해나가야 되지 않을까라는 생각이 드는데 그 문제와 관련돼서는 한미 양국의 전문가들이 이미 논의를 시작을 했습니다. 특히 이 평화연구소하고 또 한국의 전문가들이 그런 논의들을 통해서 중장기적으로 지속 가능한 동북아시아와 한반도에서의 한미동맹의 역할에 대해서 좋은 방안들을 마련할 것으로 믿고 있습니다.
So regarding your second question, I think there is a lot of cooperations that can happen between Korea and United States for a denuclearization process, as I mentioned before. But regarding the peaceful unification as well as peace in the region, assuming that we have established peace in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia, I think there will be a lot of adjustment in the role and the function of the ROK-US alliance. And then many of the experts in Korea and the United States started devising plans for the future of the ROK-US alliance. Also, we have a USIP here, which is working very closely with the Korean experts to devise mid to long-term plan to establish a sustainable cooperation mechanism between the alliance so that we can contribute to peace and the stability of the Korean Peninsula as well as in Northeast Asia.
I think we have time for just very few more questions, okay? Let's take last two. One there, right at the back, yeah. And we'll take both together.
장관님 안녕하세요. 보이스 오브 아메리카의 김영경 기자라고 합니다. 이번에 한국 정부가 탈북민 2명을 북한으로 되돌려보낸 것에 대해서 국제사회에서 우려의 목소리가 나오고 있습니다. 16명을 살해한 혐의가 있다고 해도 한국 내에서 재판을 받아야 하는 게 맞지 않았냐. 그게 국내법에도 맞고 국제법에도 맞다는 그런 지적이 나오고 있는데요. 대한민국 정부의 좀 정확한 입장을 설명해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
We'll take the second question too, yeah.
네, 반갑습니다. 저는 미국 자유아시아 방송의 이상민 기자라고 합니다. 방금 전 말씀하실 때 미국 간의 초기 신뢰 구축을 위해 필요한 창의적인 방안을 말씀하셨는데요. 그중에 세 번째가 공동 번영을 언급하시면서 대북 제재 완화를 말씀하셨습니다. 그러면서 그 대북 제재 완화를 위해서는 어느 단계에서 어느 범위에서 할지가 중요한 쟁점이고 이에 대한 그 창의적인 방법이 필요하다고 말씀하셨는데요. 미국 같은 경우는 북한의 실질적인 비핵화 조치 있기 전까지는 대북 제재가 없다는 그런 입장인데 지금 한국 측에서 말씀하시는 이런 창의적 방법이 어떤 건지 대북 제재 관련해서 말씀 감사하겠습니다.
So the first question that was raised was that recently there has been a case where the Korean government returned and deported 2 North Korean residents who have came to South Korea after murdering 16 people, and there is a concern from the international society that these individuals should have been tried within the South Korean court and then be punished if there was any kind of misconduct that they have committed. So in this regard, we'd like to hear Minister's opinion regarding why such cases has been dealt in such manner within South Korea. And the second question is the confidence-building measure between Korea as well as the United States. So the minister has mentioned that there will be a creative measure to build prosperity in the region. And one of the things that he mentioned is that there might be a consideration of a partial sanction relief against North Korea to establish confidence between the parties involved. So in that sense, the creativity here might be the scale of the sanction relief and the process of how the sanction relief might take place. However, the United States stance is that the US government will not relieve sanctions against North Korea unless there is a serious effort for denuclearization. So in that sense, we would like to hear Minister's opinion on what kind of creative measures can be implemented in this procedure to get a sanction relief and achieve a co-prosperity in the region.
네, 첫 번째 질문에 대해서 답변을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 북한 어선에서 16명을 살해했다라는 첩보를 입수했습니다. 그리고 그 어선이 NLL 북방 한계선 근처에 왔습니다. 그 북한 어선은 바로 기술을 한 것이 아니고 이틀 정도 계속해서 도망을 갔습니다. 그래서 북방 한계선 근처에 통상적으로 우리 해군이 처리하는 방식들이 있는데 그래서 우리 해군 특공대가 가서 납포를 했습니다. 그리고 나서 2명을 분리신문을 했습니다. 그 부분에 대해서는 강요를 한 것이 아니고 그야말로 각자가 범행의 과정을 아주 상세하게 진술을 했습니다. 그런 상황에서 한국 정부는 어떤 선택을 할 것인가 하는 부분들인데요. 저희들이 통상적으로 동해에서 이 북한 어민들이 표류하거나 또는 기순하거나 다양한 사례들이 있습니다. 그때 원칙은 무엇이냐면은 기순 의사가 정확할 때, 기순 의사라는 것은 출발부터 동기와 또 의도, 준비 과정, 또 도피 과정 이런 것들을 종합적으로 판단합니다. 근데 이번 같은 경우에는 기순 의사의 진정성을 수용하기는 어려웠다라는 것이고, 기순 의사를 밝혔다기보다는 물론 기순 의사를 밝혔지만은 그것이 일종의 범행에 대한 도피 목적으로 해석을 했습니다.
So regarding the two deported North Korean residents who have killed 16 people in the fishing vote, so we received an intel brief and the report stating that these individuals have committed such a crime, and then they were using this fishing vote to approach the NLL. And when they approached the NLL, they have not come to the South Korean part of the NLL, but ran away from our inspections for a couple days. And after the ROK Navy seized these individuals, we went through this joint investigation and interrogation process. So we put these individuals in two separate rooms for interrogation. And during the time, they have confessed the murdering of the 16 individuals, and they had a very detailed explanation. So therefore, we thought the crime that they've committed has something that we can trust. And then later on, when these individuals have completed their interrogation process, the Korean government had to make a decision. So usually, when North Korean fishing vessel crosses the NLL, comes to the East Sea of South Korea, there's two different cases. One is an accidental approach to South Korea's sea, and the second one is that there are some people who want to defect from North Korea and uses the boat to come to the South Korean side. And during the time when we have an interrogation of these individuals, we will ask their will for defection. And there are some fishermen who want to return to their country, and there are some people who want to stay in South Korea. And when we evaluate the will that they have, we have a comprehensive review process to check the sincerity of their will. We will go through their preparation settings as well as the will and all the kind of things that these individuals say during the interrogation and make a decision to protect these individuals under South Korean law or return them to North Korea. So in this case, when these two fishermen were coming to South Korea, they initially did not have a will to come to South Korea, but they were trying to run away from the crime that they have committed. That is why in this particular case, we made a decision to deport them and send them back to North Korea.
참고로 말씀을 드리면은 지난 10년간 북한 어민들 중에서 기술을 한 사람들은 받아들였지만은 다시 돌아가겠다고 한 사람들은 돌려보냈습니다. 지난 10년간 그 숫자는 185명입니다. 그리고 국제법적으로 국제법에서의 난민 규약이라든가 또 국내법의 난민법도 있지만은 이러한 전적인 국제 규범으로 보면은 이 비정치적 살인은 보호 대상이 아니다라고 알고 있습니다.
So for the past decade, there were a number of cases where the fishermen wanted to come to South Korea, and there were some fishermen who wanted to return to their home country. So we've returned 185 North Korean residents who had a will to return to their country. And also there's a lot of international conventions, including the refugee conventions that were set by the United Nations, as well as there's domestic law concerning the refugees coming to South Korea. And within this refugee convention, there is a clause stating that the murder that was caused with a non-political intent is not something that we can protect. There is a way to not protect individuals who have committed a murder without having a political intent. So therefore, we had to make a decision to return them to North Korea.
그리고 두 번째 질문과 관련돼서는 물론 지금 현재 북한과 미국의 협상 과정에서 제재 완화의 시점과 또 수준 이런 부분들은 매우 중요한 협상의 의제입니다. 하노이 회담 이후 북한과 미국은 여러 의제에서 차이점을 줄여나가고 있지만 여전히 차이를 보이고 있는 부분들은 제재 문제를 둘러싼 차이라고 생각을 합니다. 그렇지만 여러분들이 하노이 회담 과정에서도 논의되었던 스냅백 방식이라든가 다양한 또 기술적인 방안들이 있지 않을까라는 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 이런 부분들은 또 북한과 미국이 실무 협상을 통해서 차이를 줄여나가는 과정이 필요하지 않을까라는 생각이 듭니다.
And regarding the sanction relief that will be negotiated between North Korea and the United States, I guess the biggest issue surrounding the sanction relief is the scale as well as the timeline of when the sanction relief will happen. So in this case, there were particular discussion that did took place in Hanoi, and then during this discussion in Hanoi, there were a lot of issues that were discussed, and then the United States and the North Korea were able to find out that there was a huge gap between these two countries. And the biggest gap, I guess, would be the concept of sanction relief that these two countries had. And one of the options that were discussed was snapback. And I think there's other technical issues that can be discussed to be between the two countries to be applied for the partial sanction relief issues. And therefore, it is important for the North Korea and the United States to come together during the working level discussions to try to reduce the gap and try to find a way to resolve this issue.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give the minister a big round of applause, okay? Thank you. And then I understand that the next session starts immediately, so you're going to have to wait for a break, okay?